institutions in collaboration with the institutions, the greater the student is at completing financial aid, because they now have this opportunity to visualize themselves in a higher education institution. And then with that, they know that they can make college affordable by completing financial aid. So we always want to encourage students to do this. More examples is exposure to scholarship, but also, again, as we mentioned in the Black Ed Agenda recommendations, is when we partner with institutions and we partner with community-based orgs, now we have the opportunity to have a budget to go on these college tours, so that way students can be exposed. All right. And so that was my time. I'm going to pass it over to our lovely partners at EdTrust West, Denise and Maya.
Thank you so much, Michaela, and thank you for the incredible work that you do at Blue to support our Black students. Please, round of applause, a virtual round of applause for Michaela for the incredible work. My name is Denise Luna. I'm the Director of Higher Education Policy at EdTrust West, and I'm here with my lovely colleague, Maya Valree, a Senior Policy Analyst at EdTrust West, and we'll be presenting on supporting student parents and adult learners. And if you go to our next slide, I'll share a little bit about EdTrust West. At Trust West, we're committed to advancing policies and practices that dismantle the racial and economic barriers embedded in California's education system. And over the years, if we go on to our next slide here, at Trust West, we have partnered and focused on supporting our student parents, because in our research, we saw a clear need that supporting student parents is critical for our state and to support their needs, and making sure that we are there as a state, is making sure that we're supporting our student parents. And at Trust West, we're really excited because we co-created the California Alliance for Student Parent Success with California Competes.
I think, I don't know, that maybe that was just me.
Oh, Denise, I think you muted yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Oh, sorry about that. I was sharing. Were you able to hear me when I was sharing out, or now I'm going to pass it over to my
college career?
Yeah, Denise, we didn't hear, but I can take over. I can take over now. So yeah, thank you.
That's where he is now.
There's someone unmuted. Thank you, Denise, for that wonderful intro. Like Denise said, I'm Maya Valree, Senior Policy Analyst at EdTrust West, and I co-lead the organization's student parent portfolio. I did drop a link if you want to stay connected, and I'll share some more links a little later. But if you want to stay connected to our work, you can sign up for the Alliance's newsletter. But let's jump right in. Who are student parents in California? To start, or to be clear, student parents, this is not a niche population or even a small population of students, as some folks may believe. And so if we look, it's not, I will send you another link. But if we look on a more macro scale, so nationwide, across the U.S., there are millions of student parents. So 1 out of every 5 college student is parenting. And in California, so when we, come down to like a micro scale, there are 300,000 undergrads currently enrolled in public colleges and universities that are parents. And that translates to 1 in 8 students. We know that a majority of these students are of color, so Black, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander. We also know that female students are almost twice as likely than their male students or male counterparts to have children. Additionally, I want to note that there are 100,000 graduate student parents in California. And so when we look across both the undergraduate and graduate levels together, we're talking about more than 400,000 student parents statewide. And then one of part of the work that we do with the Alliance, so the California Alliance for Student Parent Success, our work, of course, focuses on the currently enrolled student parents. So again, talking about our undergrads and graduate students, but we're also hoping to build infrastructure and a pathway to higher ed enrollment and certificate and degree attainment for the nearly 4 million parents in California without a college degree. So we see our work as twofold. In terms of next slide. Thank you, Jessica. Perhaps unsurprisingly, student parents tend to be older than their non-parenting peers. So in California, 34 is the median age of a student parent, and that's compared to when we look at their non-parenting peers, 21 is the median age. Student parents tend to have multiple children, so 2 or more children, which means that they have increased expenses, so food, housing, childcare, etc. And notably, 2/3 of student parents in California are first generation college students. And so every time I share this statistic, I'm always reminded that we collectively, everyone in this room, state policymakers, higher education leaders, advocates, college staff, faculty, etc., that we have the power to make sure that the children of these student parents are not first gen, right? So if we support a student parent, we essentially have the opportunity to change their family's trajectory and the trajectory of the lives of their children. Next slide. During the 2019-2020 academic year, 46% of student parents received federal Pell Grants, and that's in comparison to 37% of their non-parenting peers. At the CSU, so the Cal State University, and the University of California, a majority of student parents receive Pell Grants. So nearly 80% of student parents at those systems, again, at the UC and the CSU, receive Pell Grants. So that a majority of student parents received a Pell Grant in 2019-2020. Next slide. What does college affordability look like for student parents? So student parents at 2-year colleges face an affordability gap that is over 5 times larger than that of their non-parenting peers. And in California, that gap exceeds $20,000, which is not necessarily surprising given the state's high cost of living. But it is one of the only states in which that gap, the affordability gap, exceeds that much. And the affordability gap disproportionately affects our Black student parents, single mothers, students from low-income backgrounds, many of whom have limited access to affordable and accessible childcare and are fully independent from their families. And so these students are often relying on a combination of like loans, hourly wages, credit cards, and public benefits to make ends meet. And so we just want to highlight this and just reiterate that we need to work together to close that gap for our student parents. Next slide. This just touches on a little bit what I just shared, but this is just a map. It shows you that California is one of the only states where the gap, that affordability gap for student parents exceeds $20,000. So yeah, this map shows how much student parents are paying at public colleges and universities across the country. Next slide. From really positive, from 2023 to 2025, we saw an increase in the number of FAFSA and CADAA applications submitted by adult learners. So those are students that are 30 years old or older, some of which are student parents. So I saw an increase, and also it's not reflected here, but we also saw a similar trend in FAFSA and CADAA applications among students ages 25 to 29 between the same year, so 2023 to 2025. And so what that tells us is that, more students, adult students are applying for financial aid, but also likely, accessing higher education for the first time. So want to uplift that, more adult students in higher ed. Next slide, please. There are multi-generational benefits to supporting student parents. And so student parents in California are raising more than 500,000 children. And so this is important, as we all know, that a parent's SES or socioeconomic status is largely a predictor of their child's or children's developmental and life outcomes. And so just to put that 500,000 figure into perspective, that number is larger or exceeds the total number of children in 15 states and DC. And that number also constitutes 6% of the state's 9 million children. So a significant portion of our children, or our state's children, are being raised by parents in college. Next slide. Thank you. So I want to pause here for a moment because I know, I threw out a lot of numbers and percentages and data. And before we go any further, just want to like zoom out and like ground ourselves in the humanity, like, and just like human faces behind those numbers. And so I used to be a student parent, and this work is so important to me. But this photo is from our California Student Parent Summit that we hosted just a few months ago at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And so at that summit, we brought together nearly 300 folks from across the state. And that was the largest student summit that has been hosted. So really proud of the growth that we've seen in the last few years. But my favorite part, like a great day, but my favorite part of the day was in like a policy session or a breakout session. It was this panel, so this multi-gen panel with students, with a California Community College student, a California State University student, and a UC student, as well as an alum. And it took us beyond that data, beyond percentages, into the real lives of people with real challenges, real barriers, real aspirations. And so I just want to call out a few of those students that were on our panel. So there was Heather Willoughby, who is a UC Santa Cruz alum. Heather co-founded a student organization on campus and launched the student parent / dependent meal plan. And during her panel, I was like so touched by this. Her child profoundly shared that their mom is an amazing organizer. There was also Kalisha Gomez, who was at the Riverside City College, and she used to work as a housekeeper, but she found that work no longer fulfilling after having children. And so she made the courageous decision to return to college as an adult learner with three kids. She's now pursuing a nursing degree. And she serves as the president of the Riverside's Student Parent Club. And last but not least, there's Monique Estrada, who began her educational journey at a California Community College and is now a PhD student. And so folks may have heard from her earlier, but she's a PhD student at UC Santa Barbara. And so when asked about her superpower, her son, who didn't hesitate, said, "My mom's superpower is love." So I just want to highlight them to ground ourselves and just underscore that kids are watching us. They're learning from us. They're learning from their parents, and they see their parents fighting for like a better future for them, and as well as themselves. They see the sacrifices, etc. So if we do our jobs right and we support these student parents, we're supporting the future and their kids. Next slide. A few promising practices for student parents. Track student parent and adult learners, track student parent enrollment, financial aid completion, and outcomes to guide policy and funding. So at both the state and institutional levels, that should be happening. We also encourage the appointment of dedicated staff or offices to coordinate student parent supports. So think a student parent coordinator, a student parent liaison, or even a student parent program, right, to support these students. And just for sake of time, I won't go through all of them, but I wanted to highlight that colleges should be offering cost of attendance adjustments for student parents to increase their financial aid packages to cover essentials like like childcare and increased like food costs and things like that. As I shared before, student parents there is a college affordability gap for student parents, and so we should be offering or colleges should be offering those cost of attendance adjustments. That QR code at the bottom of the slide will take you to the Alliance's sponsored legislation, so the Gains for Student Parents Act, and I'll put it in the chat as well. That will take you to our landing page that will tell you all about the Gains Act, and also has templates, toolkits, etc., to support with implementation on your campus, on your college campus. And lastly, I will just wanted to highlight one thing on this slide. If you're a college, consider opting in to participate in the California Ability to Benefit state process. And so that is like essentially a carve out that allows adults without a high school diploma an opportunity to receive federal financial aid should they meet certain criteria. And then want to encourage y'all, which I'll put in the chat, to sign up for the Alliance's newsletter and apply for a membership, which is free and takes less than 5 minutes. But there's a QR code that will link you and direct you there. So thanks all, and I will pass it now to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you to you. Thank you to Denise, to Michela, to Jessica for coordinating all this. It's really powerful to all be together. And I'm going to be speaking today with Madeleine Villanueva from Immigrants Rising. My name is Nancy Jodaitis, but also just want to take a moment and think about the connections that we have between all of these populations. There are immigrant students who are parents, immigrant students who are Black, vice versa, and many more. So I'm glad that we're thinking today about how we can make sure that all individuals are welcome at our colleges and universities. I work for Institutional Solutions. We're an organization that really works to improve institutional practices, focusing on protecting student data, successfully enrolling students, and increasing financial aid paid rates through the California DREAM Act. And I'm so excited to be here with my colleague, Madeleine Villanueva.
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everyone. I'm Madeleine Villanueva, she, her pronouns with Immigrants Rising. We are a statewide organization that works to empower undocumented folks through resources, trainings, programming, and policy advocacy. And so I'm going to get us started with the next slide, if we can go to that, please. To talk a little bit more about immigrant students and who we mean when we are talking about immigrant students. And for the purpose of our time today, we are more focused on undocumented and mixed status students. And as you can see here on the slide, there are a few ways that folks can become undocumented in the country, and also affects like how folks navigate and seek resources in our institutions. So that could include entering without inspection through a border, coming into the country with some sort of visa, overstaying and then losing that visa. But this also includes folks who have access to temporary protections through DACA, TPS, and are in the process of adjusting their status. So folks who are who have a pending asylum or U visa case. And I think as we've seen with the last year, right, these are vulnerable immigrants. And then when we talk about mixed status students, I do want to define that as those who come from households where family members have different immigration status. For example, a student who is a US citizen, but they have undocumented parents. And so if we go to the next slide, I think with the chaos of what we're experiencing in this year, right, what we are uplifting and what we're asking for you to uplift as well is that financial aid for all available. A financial aid for all eligible students is still available here in California, including for our immigrant communities. And if we go to the next slide, we have this great resource here to remind undocumented students specifically, but I think any immigrant students, of the different policies and resources to support them in their education journey, including in-state tuition or AB 540, state financial aid right through the California DREAM Act. Scholarships are still open for undocumented students, right? We have a really great list available at Immigrants Rising. And there's also all the great work and support that you all are doing in our different campuses and community-based organizations, and want to highlight that overall message, right? If we click on the transition for this slide, that students can keep going in their goals even with everything happening, and they are not alone in their educational journey. If we could go to the next slide, please.
And I think it's important as we're thinking about how do we elevate AB 540, how do we elevate the California DREAM Act, that we also make sure that we're elevating the protections are available in California. We are in unprecedented times in terms of attacks on immigrants and attacks on higher education, but wanting to make sure that we all remember and tell our students FERPA protections are still there, that there are protections for financial aid, that model policies have actually put in place specific policies that colleges and universities need to take to support immigrant students and make sure that they feel welcome, and that also there's been systemic guidance. I put together this great resource when I was at Immigrants Rising, and Madeleine has updated it to make sure that it's staying current with the times. Not only does it have links to all of those places, but it actually guides you with specific questions and recommendations about how to make sure that this is actually taking place on your campus. And also just thinking about how we make sure that we think about AB 540 and we elevate that as it's a door opener. It opens the door to in-state tuition or exemption from out-of-state fees. People can get fee waivers if they meet AB 540 eligibility, and opportunities to be able to participate in specific programs. But it also, with the next click, will show you how it also opens doors to the California DREAM Act for undocumented students, just to see their financial aid, to be able to get their financial aid and sometimes scholarships dispersed, and also to have great opportunities for professional development, such as the Dreamer Service Grant, College Corps, or fellowships that are available right on your campus. But pairing AB 540 and California Dream Act so that students know that they need to make sure both of those pieces go together. And in the next slide, if students are like, wait, is there even any kind of financial aid available for me? California has lots of financial aid. The California Student Aid Commission has done a great job in terms of elevating that. There's institutional aid that's available. And this resource that we created, you'll see with a little heart, that does require AB 540 for a lot of these pieces. But scholarships are available regardless of immigration status. And this resource also talks about, what if you go to the CSU? What if you go to the UC? What about the CSU or privates? There's opportunities at all of those schools, and we want to make sure that students know that those are still in place.
And then, so we do also want to share some of the numbers, as our colleagues have done, also around the student population. I think we will be focusing specifically on undocumented students in CADAA, just given some of the trends we've seen with those numbers, right? And so in this slide, we can see a pretty sizable undocumented student enrollment here in California, which is not surprising given our large immigrant population, right, and the many policies and resources and support we have available. As you can see, there has been a decline in that enrollment rate for the past few years because of a lot of different factors, including our kind of like unstable political climate, attacks on programs that are supportive like DACA, and as well as the pandemic, right? This slide shows the most recent number we have, which is around 87,000 in 2022. But if we go to the next slide, when we kind of compare that to the California Dream Act application numbers, there's a pretty big gap with that, right? If we look at that 2022 year, again, only about half of enrolled students, unfortunately, turned in a CADAA. And we have also seen this decline as well, as you can see from the slide, with the last year being unfortunately the lowest number of CADAA applications that we've gotten in the 10-year history of the application. And if we also go to the next slide, we're still off to a pretty slow start as well in this year, with only about 935 CADAs submitted as of October 30th. And I believe it's not reflected here, but about 115 of these are for mixed status students, since that is available again for this year. And we showed these numbers, I think, both as a call to action and a sound of alarm to people, but also to call us in to think about, like, how can we work together to reverse this trend, to make sure that amidst the uncertainty that our communities are facing, that they also see that there are still opportunities, there are still resources, there are still ways to access higher education and their goals. And what does that look like, and what is the role we're going to play in that? And so I'm going to pass it to Nancy to kind of say a little bit more of what that looks like.
Yes, Madeleine, I think those are very sobering numbers, but I like how you talked about it. It is sort of sounding the alarm bell, but it's also calling us in. How can we make sure that we continue to build hope and stay committed, and that we be those beacons of hope for the students that we are serving? Because right now, I think for a lot of students to say, well, apply for financial aid, there's a few other concerns that they have ahead of them. One of them is it actually safe to go to college? Is it possible for me to go to college? And so we think that it's really important in terms of the opportunities that we can take to make sure that we are building hope and staying committed. We also think it's really important to be able to make sure that we are defending higher education and preventing anticipatory surrender. In that way, what I mean around preventing anticipatory surrender, a lot of times if people don't know, they can sort of freeze, or they'll sort of err on the side of caution and not want to give incorrect information or potentially put someone at harm. We think that now it's a really important time to make sure that we understand that executive orders, they are definitely guidance from the executive office, from the President of the United States, but they are not binding unless they are in compliance with federal and state laws. Federal and state laws supersede executive orders, and in California, we have very strong laws as well as the federal laws that are available. So with the next click, you'll see that it's really important that we defend federal and state law, that we elevate FERPA protections, not only that we know that they're there, but that we make sure that students know that you must, as an educator, protect information unless there is specific legal standards that are met, and to understand that we have model policies here in California, like I talked about before, but we also have a governor and a legislator that are actively supporting immigrant students. The Attorney General, who created that, promoting safe and secure campuses for all, which are model policies for the higher ed as well as the K through 12, has also filed 80 cases against the executive orders that have come out that are trying to actually hurt California's populations and hurt the strong work we've done over many decades to make sure that college remains open to all students regardless of immigration status. And also just reminding us that we have the power of the people. We are those who actually need to make sure and are often the front lines for students to know that there are laws that are protecting them, that there are protections in place at their campus. So with the next click, I also wanted to talk to you or show you, and you will get these slides later, in terms of how it is that the attack on higher education and on immigrant populations is often outside of the law. And so that we need to understand that legal framework and be able to communicate that effectively so students know that we're standing behind them and that we are actually doing that, not just because it's right, because it's just, but because we need to comply with the law. And in the next slide, I think it's also really important. I'm so glad there's so many of you here today. I see there's over 250 people who are here with us. It's important that we gather with our community, that we work with our community, excuse me, and that we make sure undocumented students know that they are not alone.
Thank you, Nancy. Hopefully you get some water. But I think with that grounding, right, like what are these promising practices that we can all do, and we can encourage our colleagues and our organizations to do to support immigrant students? And so I think the first one we have listed here on our next slide is just uplifting the value of higher education. I think with all of the chaos, with everything happening, we have a lot of immigrant, especially undocumented folks, questioning whether college is for them right now, whether it's valuable and worth it to go to higher education. And so we want to uplift these talking points for you all from our partners at First Gen Empower, and think about how we can incorporate these messaging to make sure that students understand what higher ed can bring to them, including networks, community resources, the skills, right, to pursue career goals, including contracting and entrepreneurship, and how can we say a little bit more of this to lead folks to pursue opportunities, including through those provided in financial aid and the California Dream Act, right? I think one thing I want to highlight in this slide is with the next click that we have, which is also reminding undocumented students specifically, right, that their immigration status is not static, and sometimes that may change in the future, and also that their education is something that is not ever going to be attached to their immigration status, and they can take that wherever they end up in life. And so we can go to the next slide.
And I think it's just really important that we remember that language is key. Language in terms of defending, language in terms of being bold, language in terms of helping individuals stay strong, but also very simple things. And you heard this throughout the presentations today, that we always say FAFSA and DREAM, that we link them together. Because as a financial aid counselor, I would always say, like, did you do your FAFSA? Did you do your FAFSA? But undocumented students know that they are not eligible for the FAFSA, or students who are mixed status families might have concerns about their ability to be able to do that safely. And so wanting to make sure that we always are talking about the FAFSA or the DREAM. And in the next slide, also thinking about how we can make sure that we use inclusive language. I created this resource at the request of an administrator at a community college, which actually gives specific ideas about how we can use language to build trust and allay fears around the California Dream Act and AB 540. So with a click, you'll see you could actually say something such as, you know, we don't have financial aid, we don't have a FAFSA on file for you. You could actually say perhaps instead, I don't see an application in our system, but you could go back to the FAFSA or the California Dream Act application and check your status, as well as make sure that our school is listed, so that we're working with this language instead of just speaking about pieces as we always have, to make sure that we're thinking about how we can make sure that they are inclusive. And this is a resource that you can use for many opportunities.
And then we know that it's also been kind of hard to make sense of every change, every policy kind of shift that's been happening in the last year, right? And I think I've been seeing a lot of kind of like want from practitioners and want from families to just be kind of told what to do. But I think we really want to ground ourselves that our role is to empower and provide information to students and families so that they can kind of make that informed decision themselves, right? Given the different situations and scenarios that we see in the community. And so I think that really looks like giving a lot of these resources that we're sharing with you all today, and then understanding and verifying details before sharing. I think part of that comes from keeping up with organizations like ours to understand what those shifts in policies and laws and the climate means and how that impacts our communities. I'm going to put a link actually to our newsletter where we do a lot of those updates and events to help make sure that you're equipped to do this empowering and information giving so that families can make that informed decision. And then with a quick click on this link, slide also, we also want to uplift this resource from partners at SoCalCan around just other guidance for communications and outreach when talking to undocumented and mixed status students and families. And we can go to the next slide. I also do want, and part of, I think, of helping families and students make that informed decision making, especially in the case of mixed status students, is helping them assess the risk when it comes to pursuing certain financial aid options, right? And again, our partners at First Gen Empower help put together these questions to help families understand kind of like what the risk is when submitting FAFSA, for example, and kind of understanding if their information has been submitted before through a previous FAFSA or to the federal government in different ways. What does that mean? And what are some other options, right? If they are not comfortable with pursuing that risk, including pursuing CADAA, for example, or doing CADAA now and FAFSA later, if that changes things for them as well. Then if we could go to the next slide, we've seen a lot of really great examples of this, I think, over the years of my work. But really right now, I think it's very important to kind of create those inclusive resources and spaces that uplift all these different options for all students, including immigrant students, like the one listed here from LA Trade Tech. And if we do the other click also, an example of an event from an LAUSD school that shows both application options, right, to normalize both options here in California and doesn't other one application over the other. We also want to make sure this is present in our digital spaces and institutional solutions. In partnership with IndocuScholars, actually put together this really great guide that helps institutions put together what those websites can look like that's friendly for undocumented and immigrant communities.
Those are so important, Madeleine. Thank you for elevating some of those promising practices. I also think this quick guide that we created at Immigrants Rising, just sort of like a one-stop shop around AB 540 scholarships and the California Dream Act, is great for people to be able to try to find information. I also think with the next click, you'll see promising practices that financial aid counselors can use in terms of increasing award rates for the California Dream Act. For those of you who are on here who are financial aid counselors, or like myself, a former financial aid counselor, there's definitely steps that we can take right away and reaffirm available services, make data protections highly visible, be conscious of our language, and then really collaborate with their feeder schools, K through 12. There's a lot of amazing K through 12 people here, undocumented student liaisons, and more. It's exciting to see the work that we can do when we work together. And the next slide, I'm also just really happy to elevate the strong role that California Student Aid Commission has taken in uplifting this protections. This is a letter that came from Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, the executive director, talking about how California's financial aid programs remain fully available. And I think this is really key. They are saying your information remains protected with us. There are actually gates that individuals will have to go through before they get that, such as the governor, the California Student Aid Commissioner, the Attorney General. So there are added protections beyond what goes available for the FAFSA. And there's also this great video that was created by Immigrants Rising that you can use on your social media, where a student themselves talks about the available protections and sort of what they did to navigate that. Because I think it's one thing for myself as an educator to say that it's different when we hear that directly from another student. And so we're going to look in the next slide. Madeleine and I are going to just talk a little bit about putting this into action.
Yeah, so we have a quick scenario here just to understand how we can use all those different resources and things we gave to you all, right? And then if we click on the next slide, basically we have like a high school senior who had previously asked a lot of questions about college, but now they're not really interested anymore. Nancy, what would you do, and what resources could you use to kind of re-inform and re-empower the student again?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you know, with the next click, we'll see it's important to talk to the class. It's not like if somebody wants to approach me directly, that's good, but people also don't want to feel singled out. So depending on the relationship that you already have, be able to also first, one, remind the class that with the next click, that California is committed to supporting all students regardless of immigration status. And I think it's also important to talk to the whole class, because not all undocumented students are Latinx, not all undocumented students are K through 12, making sure that we're thinking about our Black undocumented students, our Asian undocumented students, as well as our white undocumented students. So talking to the whole class, and this putting this note up in our classroom so that people know that we are available and we are an individual who's supporting undocumented students. And the next thing that I would do is I would remind them that California DREAM Act information is not shared with the federal government. I think that there's so many individuals who are navigating this piece of fear. And so with that, there's also a resource that you could share with them, which is the executive memo that came out from the California Student Aid Commission talking about how their information is protected. And then you could read that as well to kind of have a better understanding. And then the third thing I think that's really important to do is to make sure that you tell them, you can ask me questions. I can provide information and resources. Ultimately, you as the student must decide, but I'm here, I'm a resource. And if I don't know, let's find out together, right? I think that's really important. So with the last click on this slide, we'll just show how that guide that Madeleine was talking about advising undocumented students are also thinking about the Building Trust and Allaying Fears resource. There's information out there. There's great organizations, and we just want to thank each and every one of you today for all that you've done to be able to already take this and put it into practice. And today, when you leave, take it to the next level. Those numbers that Madeleine shared are showing that we have to do everything that we can to make sure that we don't lose an entire generation of immigrant students, and we need to continue to be the beacon of hope in California that we always wanted to be.
All right. And we are at the end of our presentation. Thank you so much, my presenters, for providing all that great information to us, and hopefully some helpful hints in how you can talk to families and students. So I wanted to open it up. We have a couple of minutes before we have to get back to the main session. So I wanted to see if anyone has any questions for any of our panelists. And I think we could probably just go off mute if we wanted, or you can put it in the chat and I'll be happy to read it. Oh, looks like Anna has her hand up, or his hand up. There.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm so sorry. I don't know if I can get a translator, Spanish translator, because I can understand English, but I don't speak well.
I'm not sure if I have a translator in this session with me.
Okay, then
To help with any translation.
I mean,
Okay.
podemos hablar en español
There
si
you go.
quiere, pero a la
Yeah.
misma vez quiero que usted sepa que hay posibilidades para que vaya a estudiar. Si usted es la misma Ana que estaba en el chat, entonces hay oportunidades para becas, hay oportunidades para otros movilidades para poder asistir, pero está un poco complicada. Puedo poner mi nombre ahí y mi email en el chat y pues tal vez así sería mejor que se nos comunicara.
Oh, sí, es la misma pregunta. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Next we have Parshan has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Just a very quick question for the panelists and everybody who's been speaking today. I am wondering, there's a lot that y'all shared, a lot of wisdom. Y'all shared with us best practices, issues that we should be looking at, focusing, what have you. And we know that all of these could sometimes be a very difficult, tall task when we're talking about policy leaders and legislators and and what have you. But if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing and do one thing this year to help increase the FAFSA CADAA, but especially CADAA rates, what would that be? Hoping some of our policy leaders may be listening. So.
Who from my panelists wants to take that one?
There-
Madeleine?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I'd be open to hear, or I'd encourage the other folks also to speak, because again, as Nancy mentioned, right, it's like an intersectional thing, and our undocumented students are also student parents or Black students, adult learners. I don't think there's one nice policy that's gonna make a difference, honestly, but there's probably different like things that can work together. I know that there was a really great increase we saw with like the high school financial aid completion law, AB 469, that really helped increase those numbers. And I'm hoping also can help introduce the option of like FAFSA and CADAA and demystify some of that for all students. It'd be great to see that in our other systems. I know there was a bill that did not pass for the community college, but I think also needs to exist within the CSU and even UC systems. AB 540 is an opener for CADAA for undocumented students, right? But there's still challenges, I think, in accessing and understanding like requirements for those, counting non-credits, adult school hours. And so we have resources like our AB 540 FAQ to help that. But I am wondering if there's like a policy solution for that as well. And then I know we also have a lot of great like laws that pass around student safety and data protection, which I think can also kind of help with the messaging, right? That it's safe to apply here, it's safe to pursue your goals. Our campuses have, and our state has put in place some protections to make it be able for you to go to school here. I can keep going. I'm gonna pass it to somebody else to add things to.
I think those are great suggestions, Madeleine. And I would also add, I think that it'd be really important for the legislature to actually make sure that their model policies that came into law through SB 54, AB 21, and these new laws that are here actually have the teeth for implementation. The Chancellor's Office, like not all colleges have actually implemented the model policies, which are protections specifically for immigrant students. And I think until they do that, students are not going to feel safe enough and clear enough about the ability to be able to attend school without fear. And there needs to be actually making sure that those have been put into place. And even if there's something on the books with the board, that it actually has to be visible. Like that's one part of the model policies, that the support needs to be visible. So I think that should be mandated, and that would go a long way. But I'm wondering what our other colleagues think would be really helpful as well.
Yes, thank you both. I think to your point, Nancy, of making it visible too, is to ensure that our families, our students know their rights and what they have access to, right? So we all as collaborators, as partners, as support to our families and students, we all know, and we're constantly ensuring that we're in the know, staying abreast on all of the changes. And so translating that to our families where they're able to understand it and have access to it. But there's a follow-up to that, is making sure that there's also a resource available now that they have that information. What are we all going to do about it? Make ourselves available, ensure that we bring people in. And so I think that's an important factor as well. So thank you both for that. And then whoever else would like to also answer.
I can share, I can jump right in. Plus one, Michaela and Nancy, Madeleine. I think on the student parent, adult learner side, colleges, policymakers, or higher education leaders and state policymakers, I think there needs to be strengthened outreach to student parents, adult learners. Because I think often these folks historically, right, have been excluded or on the periphery of higher education. And so they don't think that higher education is for them. And so we need to, increase that and then like encourage them obviously to complete FAFSA, CADAA. But also like I think there needs to be a promotion of like certificate or credentials that encompasses like certificate and degree pathways. So promoting those short-term and stackable credentials as well. And then the last thing I'll share is just like the implementation of the GAINS Act, so AB Assembly Bill 2458. So wanting, I think if colleges implement the GAINS Act to ensure that they're updating their cost of doing their cost of attendance adjustments for student parents, as well as providing those net price calculator calculations, which is a provision of the GAINS Act for student parents will be able, and adult learners as well, but student parents will be able to assess how much college will cost for them, and I think feel a lot more empowered to fill out FAFSA, fill out CADAA, and pursue higher ed. So that's what I would say.
All right, thank you for the question. Does anyone else have any other questions? All right, so then we have a short break between now and when we return back to the main session. So it's 2:03, the main session will begin again promptly at 2:15. I would suggest you just go back to the main session, and that way when it starts, it will pop up on your screen. So thank you everyone for participating, and thank you to my panelists for being such great, providing such great information to our audience. I appreciate you all coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think so.